Hello, beautiful people. Today we are setting up my March reading journal spread, and I'm going to talk about the first series I've read this month. Stick around. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, welcome, my friend. Come on in, make yourself at home, and let's get into this month's reading journal. For this month, I wanted to use the caterpillar on the mushroom. This is sort of a moment in Alice's journey where she's sort of trying to figure out where she fits in, where she belongs, and where she's going, like what's going on. And the caterpillar's just like, well, who are you? So I like this transitional period. And so for this month, I'm bringing in that mushroom vibe because that's what he's sitting on. And that's what we're going with. I'm bringing in some of this aged scrapbooking paper that has some text on it to bring in those earth tones and tie in the reading in with the sort of this aspect of nature. And I'm using these washi stickers from Amazon just to sort of bring in the whole environment of where our caterpillar lives. Then we move on to my general monthly spread. Now, this is something I'm going to consistently use each month because I like the way it works for me. On this first page is where I put in my monthly trackers, like my monthly stats, and my calendar. So I draw out one square for each day of the month, and then as I read throughout the month, every time I pick up a book, I color in that day, and then at the end of the month I can look at how many days did I read this month, how many days didn't I read, and it's just sort of a visual of, did I read every day, which is kind of my personal goal, is to read at least a little bit every day. Last month, there were 1 or 2 days a week that I didn't read at all. And so this month in March, I'm trying to read more often. And that's where I will track that. A block at the top tracks my monthly stats that I add up at the end of each month. The first one is the number of books I read, then the number of pages I've read, and then I have 2 or 3 columns at the end, which is where I put in if I've read how many fantasy novels or fantasy or fiction or romance or short stories. And I don't plug in those titles until the end of the month because I found that some months I only read fantasy, and so I just give myself one column and I put in fantasy. Sometimes I read fantasy and some poems, or fantasy and romance. And so I'll just add those columns at the end of the month instead of having a bunch of columns for genres I don't read. I only put in the columns I actually will use for that month. So at the end of the month, when I've tracked all of what I've read, whatever I've actually read, I'll add those genres into that category. Then on the adjacent page is my books read. This is where I write down every book I read, how many pages are in that book, what genre it is, if it's a fantasy, if it's a romance, if it's a young adult, if it's a biography, if it's a short story, whatever. I will put that in the genre, and whatever I read, I will put the abbreviation, the code at the bottom of this page. So when I'm looking back and I'm going, what the heck did B stand for? And I can go, oh, that was biography. And sometimes F is just going to stand for fiction if it's general fiction, or it might be a sci-fi, or it might be a whatever, or it might be a fantasy. And so my key will change every month based on whatever shorthands I use in this column. And then the last column is my ranking of that book. So whatever star rating out of 5 I felt that book was, or that story was, or that poem was, that's what I put here. I have noticed that sometimes I'll just write down the name of the person who wrote a poem, because usually I'm not reading a book of random poetry. Usually I'll sit down and read poems by a particular author, and so it's like I'll read 6 poems by this person. And so I've just been putting down the author's name and not listing all of the poems I've read. Now, granted, last month was the first month I actually read some poems, but whatever. So that's how these trackers are working. After now, this is my 3rd month doing this. I'm pretty solid on this is how my bullet journal is going to work for me. And these spreads, this is what works for me. This is the spreads, the trackers for monthly that work for me. And I'm really confident and comfortable in this system. So that's what I'm going to continue to use. Then I have my title for books read. And again, we have the heart as the book ends for that title. And now we're going to jump into my first series for this month. So the first series I've read this month was sort of reading a lot with my kids. And the first series I read is the Spiderwick Chronicles. This follows the Grace family. Jared is sort of the main point of view we get, at least to start. We get to see him and his siblings living in this new home. At the start of book 1, they're having to leave their apartment in New York. Their mom and dad have just gotten divorced and they're living with their mom. They don't really have a lot of money, and so they're staying at this shack, or many shacks stacked on top of each other, as Jared calls it. And it is this rundown home that has leaky pipes. It sounds like there's some rodents in the walls, and Jared is just not having it. He's not enjoying his new environment. But throughout this series, we get to hear all about the fantastical creatures and the gift that is their family legacy. So it's a really, really great series. It's a children's series, so keep that in mind if it's something you want to check out. But it's really well written. It's a very cute story. You get to follow this family that are going through a really difficult time, and we get to see how magic and fantasy and make-believe and the wonders of this environment help transform them and help get them through this rough time and give them a sense of confidence and accomplishment and just see them through. It's a really great series. My kids all have read it now and loved it. I've also sat down and read it because now my youngest has the series. Really, really enjoyed it for what it is. I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. For a children's first chapter book, it's a 5 out of 5. For my personal ranking, as far as what I'm reading and what I'm enjoying, I'm giving it 4 stars. I'm using this black tissue paper again to sort of anchor this page, and then I used all of the mushrooms because as you're reading the series, it's very earthy and it's very much in nature and in the environment, and the creatures they meet also they've adapted and used this environment for their home, for their clothes, for their food, for their life, because this is their environment, this is their home, this is their ecosystem. And I wanted to bring that into this spread. The aged paper, Jared finds a notebook that belonged to a past family member who used to live in this home, and the pages are kind of aged and worn. So I wanted to bring that into the layout, and then the stickers that are like the stamps and like bits of nature. It feels like it fits in with that vibe of someone who's a collector of interesting things from their environment and from history. And so I just thought all of that worked really nicely and fit in. So here are the portraits of the Grace family members. This is Jared, Simon, Mallory, and then their mom, Helene. And there's our title. And there's our first spread. Now I am going to end this video here. I like doing my layouts, but that doesn't feel like quite enough for a video. And if I do all of the books in one video, these get really, really long. So I'm breaking up my monthly into, this is the first series of the month, and this is my setup for the month. And then at the end of the month, at the beginning of the next month, I'll sort of do a recap of what else I read so that I know exactly what I read in the month. Back in January when I was trying to do this, I did it too early in the month, so I didn't get to finish the series. And I think this might be the format that I choose. Let me know below. Would you rather have one really long video that has all of the books I read, or do you prefer having it broken up into 2 videos where this is my setup and first book, and then at the end of the month, this is the rest of the things I read? Drop down in the comments below. Let me know what your thoughts are on this format, and yeah, and maybe I'll adjust. Thank you guys so much for coming out and checking out more of my reading journal. I hope you are enjoying this series and this style of videos. I'm really enjoying doing these, and the fact that they're getting such a great response from you guys makes me feel so good. So thank you all so much for your support and for watching my content. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up to let me and the algorithm know that this is some good content you'd like to see more of and that they should be shared. And if you want to see more videos moving forward, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new content. You can check me out on Instagram if you just want to see the highlights of the stuff I'm doing, and I will see you next time. Bye guys.